Alright, so I've recently done a couple of lists on demons that terrified Ed and Lorraine Warren, so if you haven't seen those yet, go check those out first, because today we are exposing them. All you non-believers who didn't like those videos, buckle up, because this one's gonna be right up your alley. Here are the top 10 times Ed and Lorraine Warren were caught lying about the paranormal. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Amityville. Considering the fact that this is one of the most famous of all of the Warren cases, it makes a lot of sense as to why it's also one of the most investigated. So here's the backstory. In 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. killed his entire family in the middle of the night and later claimed that he heard voices plotting against him. Very real, very frightening story. About a year after this, a couple named George and Kathy Lutz moved into this home with their children, and allegedly hauntings occurred. There were nightmares, unexplainable phenomena. You know, demonic things. This story turned into a book and movies, and the Warrens came to investigate. One piece of evidence is said to have been a demonic hoof print that was found in the snow outside the home, according to the Lutzes. Well, weather records have shown that there was no snowfall that day in the area to leave hoof prints in. Next, the book claims that there was extensive damage to the home, including to the home's doors and hardware, but despite that, the original locks, doorknobs, and hinges were actually untouched, which completely disproves that claim. The Warrens never presented any sort of physical evidence of these hauntings that they said they found. There is a quote ghost boy photo that many people claim as proof, but this photo is also widely believed to be a hoax. And let's be honest, we need a lot more than one photo to convince anyone who is even a little bit skeptical. The book and the movie also show the police being called to the house, but it is said that in actuality, during the 28 days of terror that drove the family from the home, they never called the police once. Also, I know it's an attorney, but it is worth mentioning that William Weber, who is the attorney for Ronald DeFeo Jr., had publicly stated the story was made up between Jay Anson, the Warrens, and George and Kathy Lutz. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Snedeker Haunting. In the 1980s, the Warrens were called to this funeral home turned family home to investigate reports of hauntings and alleged demonic possession. The family are said to have called the Warrens after experiencing some strange and violent behavior from one of their sons. This is the story that serves as the basis for the movie The Haunting in Connecticut. Here's where the catch comes in though. There was an author who worked with both the family and the Warrens in order to try and write a book about the whole ordeal. Sounds like it would be a great book, but the author couldn't even really write it. After meeting with everyone, he recanted the story and said, quote, "The family involved, which was going through some serious problems like alcoholism and drug addiction, could not keep their story straight, and I became very frustrated. It's hard writing a non-fiction book when all of the people involved are telling you different stories." I truly believe that wasn't a judgment. Going through problems like that shouldn't be judged, but it definitely does make some questions about the validity of the paranormal claims. That is not to say that these people aren't trustworthy, it's just more of a reasonable explanation for some of the things that they were experiencing. To further this point, there was an upstairs neighbor to the family that lived in this home, and this person is said to have never had a paranormal experience, and neither has anyone who has lived in the home since. In our number 8 spot today, we have Annabelle. So the Warrens are famous for their cases, but they're also famous for providing little to no evidence that they claim to have. It's very strange, but outside of what they say, there really isn't a lot to go on. So the story behind Annabelle the doll, well, I'm sure many of us are at least slightly familiar. According to Joseph Laycock in his article The Paranormal to Pop Culture Pipeline, quote, "A nursing student received a Raggedy Ann doll from her mother in 1970. When the doll exhibited strange behavior, a medium revealed that the doll was possessed by a dead woman named Annabelle Higgins. Later, this doll would go on to allegedly do some pretty gruesome and horrific things, and thus the Warrens were called to investigate. According to the couple, this doll had a demon inside of it, and it was ready and wanting to go on a sort of killing spree. The Warrens took the doll and placed it in their occult museum where it was kept safe behind glass, and they also warned visitors that anyone who dare mock the doll is sure to meet a gruesome fate. They said the last person who mocked the doll ended up dying in a motorcycle crash, but they provided no name, no details, or any evidence to corroborate this story. Also, as just for the story as a whole, this could be a coincidence, or it could just be proof of lies, but there's a 1963 episode of The Twilight Zone that is about a woman named Annabelle who gives her daughter a doll. This doll ends up coming to life, and it terrorizes the family. Seems a little familiar to me, personally. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Werewolf. So I previously talked about this case, well, I talked about all of them, and I'm not gonna lie, when I first read about this one, I felt as though it had to be a hoax. The Warrens claimed to have helped a man named Bill Ramsey, who was a sort of werewolf or wolf man. He had been arrested for attacking a police officer before, which he attributed to this possession thing. Very convenient. The couple saw this story on TV and are said to have just known that they could help Bill. Lorraine claimed to even have had a video of him transforming into this wolf, but really conveniently the footage was just never released. Like, if I had that video, I would be selling it to every tabloid I possibly could. No worries, I just have absolute gold sitting on my SD card. I'm cashing it in. The Warrens also spoke about this story in their book, Werewolf, a true story of demonic possession, and one review of the book noted how there is no actual documentation of this case at all. So as far as we're concerned, this could just be a completely made up story. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Union Cemetery. The White Lady of Union Cemetery is quite well known and is a famous haunting in Connecticut. Of course, this means the Warrens were all over it, and in 1990, Ed claimed to have captured film footage that showed the haunting and the lady herself. Ed even said, quote, "I heard a woman weeping, and I looked out and saw hundreds of ghost lights floating around and forming into a figure of a woman. I couldn't make out facial features." Despite this colorful description, no evidence was ever presented to the public. Why would you claim to have all of this evidence just to never release it? In an article called Hunting the Ghost Hunters, written by Stephen Novella, he wrote, quote, "Ed Warren has not investigated the video with any scientific rigor and refuses to allow others to do so. Despite Ed's insistence that he was engaged in scientific research, he continued to jealously hoard his alleged evidence rather than allow it to be critically analyzed, as is necessary in genuine scientific endeavors. At this point, this one is just a game of he said, she said, and I think I'm gonna need a lot more than that for a ghost story." In our number 5 spot today, we have the vampire. The Warrens are also known for their occult museum that is now closed, but was said to be the home to some of the most haunted and cursed items on the planet. And like, if these items were really as haunted as they claimed them to be, that should be easy to prove, right? One object of interest in the museum was that of a vampire coffin that they said was from a vampire they'd met and investigated. That's really cool, kind of crazy, and really creepy. Do they have any other evidence of this vampire? Like any photos, a video, even a signature? Nothing? So they could get a vampire's coffin but couldn't get any other evidence at all. Seems kinda weird and kinda convenient when fabricating a story. I'm not accusing them, I'm just saying. It sounds awfully fishy to me. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Enfield Poltergeist. This case took place in 1977, shortly after the Warrens were investigating Amityville. The story became quite sensational and it led to numerous investigations because of the wild claims that were going around. The case was mostly surrounding Janet Hodgson, who was said to be possessed by a poltergeist, and the investigations were mostly directed toward her and her sister Peggy, as well as their home, of course. Questions began to arise over the fact that almost all of the paranormal occurrences only happened when Janet and Peggy were present, and many of the, quote, evidence taken, such as audio recordings and photographs, were highly scrutinized. Also, while this is one of the most famous Warren cases, apparently they were barely even involved. It is said that they were originally denied access to the house, and once they were allowed in, they only stayed for 1 day, which doesn't really seem like a thorough investigation to me. Also, the most important part of this all is that even Janet is said to have admitted to fabricating parts of the story. So, at this point, I don't know if we can trust anyone. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Smurl family. In 1986, Jack and Janet Smurl called the Warrens to investigate as they reported demonic entities terrorizing them in their home. These entities were apparently quite violent and horrific, and Ed Warren apparently described the entity as being powerful, intangible, and very dangerous. Despite these claims, not everyone is on board with this story. A philosophy professor at New York State University, Paul Kurtz, apparently drew connections between this haunting and the Amityville case, and in regards to the Warrens, well, he had some less than kind things to say. Quote, "They have no credentials in the scientific or parapsychological communities." He went on to say, quote, "There is no explanation for the Smurl house, but I wouldn't simply assume it is a haunting. It seems to us that a great to-do has been made about it, and we wonder if it's like the Amityville horror hoax, which was based on imagination rather than an actual haunting." This goes further than this guy. Apparently even some of the members of the clergy who were brought in for blessings and exorcisms, even later reported not experiencing anything unusual in the home. Despite all of these doubts and claims, the Warrens held firm on their belief that the house truly was haunted. In our number 2 spot today, we have Arne Johnson. The story behind the latest Conjuring movie follows that of Arne Johnson, who was accused of killing his landlord Alan Bono in 1981. This was the first time that demonic possession was used as a defense in trial, as the Warrens claimed was the case. Prior to this killing, the fiancée of Arne had claimed that her brother David was showing signs of demonic possession, and the Warrens were called to help. They brought in priests and allegedly performed 3 lower exorcisms, and Ed even claimed that at one point David had 43 demons inside of him. Here's the thing with this. Not only have the priests that are said to have been involved in these exorcisms denied this, but also after some counseling and switching schools, David's behavior that was concerning improved drastically. It is said that the demons from David somehow moved into Arne, thus the killing, so of course this was the defense used in court. The devil made me do it. The plea, however, unsurprisingly, was unsuccessful, and he went to prison for this crime. In 2007, the older brother of David, Carl, actually attempted to sue Lorraine Warren and the author of The Devil in Connecticut for unspecified damages, and as part of the lawsuit he claimed that his family was manipulated. He said that both the couple and the author had, quote, concocted a phony story about demons in an attempt to get rich and famous, and he said that this was all at the expense of his family. In our number 1 spot today, we have The Conjuring. So many of us have seen The Conjuring, at least the first in the franchise, which centers on the Perron family and the hauntings they experienced in their home. Of course, the movie exaggerated certain things, but both Lorraine and one of the daughters insisted that most of the movie was accurate to real-life events. Other than them, though, most people contradict those claims quite a bit. The more current owner of the home, Nora Sutcliffe, dove into some research about the history of the home, and in doing this, discovered many factual errors that were being claimed as true. She released an entire video detailing it, and one of the most important parts of it was about the woman that they claimed was behind the hauntings, Bathsheba Sherman. Both the Warrens in the movie claimed that she was a witch who performed satanic worship and sacrifices, but all of this, including the witch part, turned out to be completely made up. There might have been paranormal activity going on, but it wasn't at all what they claimed it to be. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Alright, let's go. Ed and Lorraine, it's on. well, rather